Austin Makoha, Mike Kihunga Nyagodhi, Kevin Madanga, Kennedy Onyango, Sila Sawe, Ryan Mwendwa, Anthony Kimeu, Erickson Chalo Mutisia, Caroline Shiramba, Kennedy Othiambo Maina, and Ernest Kanye.
Good evening. David Shaban Baraza, Brian Lemayan Kasaine, Rex Kanyike Masai, Ibrahim Kamau Wanziro, Dennis Otieno Oduor, Wilson Sitati, Brian Kimani, Clinton Mwavali, Austin Makoha, Matthew Njoroge, an unidentified young male, Joash Ombati, and Kenneth Nzeru.
Bernard Kiplagat, Brian Ezra Odhiambo, Kevin Mwawasi, Eric Kayoni Shieni, Kevin Ochieng, Duncan Onsongo, Francis Kipkorir Sawe, Bernard Mungai Nduati, Beasley Kogi, Evans Kiratu Karobia, Anthony Masharia, Chris Gitonga, Choding Malang, Dennis Juma.
Kennedy Onyango, David Chege, Credu Oyaro, Denzel Omondi, Carlton Mwangi, Fantelo Nakal, Braxton Omae Mogesi, Ben Scott Onyango, John Boydras, Timothy Muchui Kalenywa, Bernard Mungai Nduati, Wycliffe Kane Mwende, Daniel Kakai, Timothy Miheso.
Charles Owino, Alex Muteti, Dennis Libanga, Shakil Obienge, Abdakadir Sadia, John Musili Mulwa, Regan Ouko, Ian Ochieng Juma, Tilan Odhiambo, Isaac Njuguna Mbugwa, Samuel Mutisia, Madenge Kevin, Odhiambo Kevin, plus many unknown.
All right, those are not just names, those are victims that lost their lives during the Gen Z demonstrations last year, and several others that were injured continue to live with permanent disabilities. Some are still in hospital, including a story that we heard from Witemere recently in Nyeri County of a man who is 37 years old and continues to suffer from the implications of those wounds, but also having to suffer from mental challenges. Joining us now is it's Sarah Bonaya, who is the Commissioner at the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights. Good morning, Commissioner. And when you listen to the conversations, the names being read out, and so much success, what has been the situation like for KNCHR?
Yeah, KNCHR has been at the center of the process of ensuring justice for the victims. And in doing that, we've been on the ground. Our team have been on the ground assessing the situation. We've also gotten in touch with duty bearers in the relevant sectors. Mm-hmm. And of course, as usual, there is promise that action will be taken and justice will be done. But of course, as we've even heard from the previous commentators, even the old cases have still not been dealt with effectively. So, but as a commission, we have gotten relevant data and we've reached out to the relevant agencies. We also support in the issue of redress and investigation of cases. Yeah.
Maybe you can help us, in summary, what the status looks like as we speak.
Pardon?
You can help us with how the status looks like on most of these cases, because the last time we heard from the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions, which is on 29th of April 2024, he had said that IPOA has been pursuing some of these matters, many of them saying that the IPOA file, he had recommended that the IPOA file be closed with a rider that same may be reviewed should any new information arise. This is concerning, let me just go, this is Emmanuel Giggs Tata, who died. Then the summary from the DPP was that the events of 25th of June 2024 were unprecedented, and hence a public inquest on its own may not wholly address the issues. To address all the underlying causes, a strictly judicious and prosecutorial process on its own may not be sufficient. A whole of society approach may be needed. In this regard, the ODPP continues to work with all stakeholders to find the best way forward that will comprehensively address the issues. So when the prosecutor says such a thing, what is KNCHR left to do?
Yes, as a KNCHR, we investigate cases, and most of these issues we also work in partnership with others like IPOA. We also sit on the board of IPOA, and unfortunately our chair, who used to represent us on that board, passed on. But we still refer cases to IPOA because we have to have clear line of responsibility. So most of them are directly under IPOA's investigation, and but we partner in the follow-up process. Okay,
and if you are to reflect on what the DPP is saying, whole of society approach, what would that look like, knowing that we are led by a constitution?
Clearly, we can't. We have apportioned responsibilities to different agencies, and unless they take up their roles and responsibilities as required, then the rule of law will be suspended. And maybe that is a circumstance under which we are finding ourselves now. Okay. Because if the relevant agencies are not empowered to take up their roles and responsibilities and to come up with the clear direction in terms of justice, apportioning justice, then we'll continue getting, because these issues should be dealt with finality. Otherwise, we'll keep on getting cyclic kind of occurrences like we have already witnessed. Yeah.
All right, Odwar, for you.
Yeah, it's very unfortunate for such a statement from the Director of Public Prosecution. But there's a thread here, Sam. When he came to the office, there are cases, high-profile cases that were touching on the political class that are withdrawn. So if you read from that context, you connect it to a situation where the families are seeking justice, but then this statement is coming out, it becomes very unfortunate. But let me mention this, some around cases of June 25th and the data. If you read the Human Rights Watch report that was released on November 5th, 2024, it says that 1 hour before Parliament was breached, police shot 6 people along Parliament Road dead, and 2 outside the entrance to the Senate building. And about 2:32 p.m., when the Parliament fence and the Intercontinental Hotel side was brought down, the General Service Unit shot dead 7 people and dumped their body behind the mausoleum. The same report says that within that time, the GSU officers shot another 10 people before they were overpowered. In very simple mathematics, within that span alone, about 25 people had been shot in Parliament. Now, the same report says that bodies were later picked at night, and where they were dumped, it's not yet known. The report also mentioned that there were snipers who were taking out protesters. Today, Sam, you'll ask yourself, where is the CCTV footage of Parliament of that day? There have been attempts to get it, but Parliament claims that at that moment, the CCTV was malfunctioning. Is it really, really possible that the CCTV were malfunctioning? These are the
so there has been attempts by who to get the footage?
So according to the Human Rights Watch report, the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights, where the commissioner represents, attempted to get the footage, but it was unsuccessful. But because of public interests and the nature of this violence, it behooves the National Assembly to proactively release this footage so that the public can know the truth.
So the excuse is that the CCTV cameras were
malfunctioning.
So how do they explain? Because I think I've heard, you can correct me if I'm wrong, Fred, Kimani Ichung'wah, the leader of majority, saying, those of us that managed to watch the footage, you will see where the protesters were coming from and where the criminals were coming from. So if they're able to see that, from what malfunctioning it could be?
That's the question. and if Kimani Ichung'wah saw it, then they should release it to the public. So we know the truth of what happened moments before Parliament was breached and late into the hours after Parliament was breached.
So then the question, because I know Ajam, you've been doing a lot of work, especially in assisting with victims that may have suffered a police action. And you've been successful on some occasions. In a situation where there's also word that Kenya Defence Forces may have been involved, who pursues justice for such?
Ideally, under our constitution, there are agencies that have been given that responsibility to pursue justice. In fact, civil society organizations such as International Justice Mission are just coming in to complement, but they are not duty bearers. But then there is also another responsibility that is given to these agencies. And that responsibility is to check on other agencies that are not performing their functions. We have constitutional commissions that are actually oversight bodies, such as the Kenya National Human Rights Commission. It's an oversight body. And therefore, one of its functions is to protect the observance of democratic principles and values. In instances such as this, where we find or we suspect that there is reluctance on certain public institutions to perform their functions, and yet they are important functions such as investigations and prosecutions, I think then the oversight bodies should come in. One way, in my view, of doing that is by approaching the courts and seeking declarations, including a declaration to declare people who are reluctant to perform their public duty ineligible to hold public office. Yeah, because when you get into that government position, you are given that position to perform that function. If you are reluctant to perform it, then you are ineligible to hold that office. So in my view, from where I sit, there is a sort of gap, a gap in keeping other institutions accountable. It's now 1 year down the line since the Gen Z protests, since the killings, since the maimings and the assault. Surely more action ought to have been taken. It is clear that there is reluctance to take certain legal actions. But then I also want to say that we should also not forget that there have been also victims in other protests. For example, in 2023, there were several victims in Kisumu. Actually, as IJM, we have filed a constitutional petition in Kisumu for 26 victims arising out of the protests in 2023. So we see sort of a systemic reluctance to pursue justice for victims arising out of political or governance protests. So that means that there's something seriously wrong within the public authorities. Like I mentioned earlier, if investigations can take 3 weeks for a member of parliament, then it can also take 3 weeks for X. There's no difference, you know. Where there is the will, then the wheels of justice move faster. So I want to challenge, and especially oversight bodies. We have the Ombudsman Office, we have the Kenya National Human Rights Commission, we have other commissions that were established in the Constitution to keep the executive, the legislature, and the other arms of government in check. And I want to challenge more action from them.
Commissioner, I'm looking at Article 59 of the Constitution that establishes the Kenya National Human Rights and Equality Commission. And one of the functions in 2D is to monitor, investigate, and report on the observance of human rights in all spheres of life in the Republic, including observance by the national security organs. I would imagine that this also takes into consideration the Kenya Defence Forces.
Yes.
If there are reports, and you have seen even a documentary by the BBC implicating a Kenya Defence Forces officer, how possible is it for KNCHR to investigate and prefer charges or recommend preference of charges on such an officer?
Yeah, of course, as we have seen with so many other cases, it's not very easy. And we do try, not only on the Gen Z cases, but even on case of Batuk in Nanyuki, where cases of violation were reported. But it's very difficult to get through the systems. And of course, the Kenya National Commission has envisaged earlier through the Constitution, and it still has a very broad mandate, but it has, through an act of parliament, has been petitioned to GEC and CAJ and different other agencies. So our role has actually been pulled apart. That has also disadvantaged us. And then another issue is our funding has completely minimized, and for us to undertake these responsibilities effectively. So the job of the Commission is very critical because we are supposed to cover both the private and public sector institutions, wherever violations of rights are concerned. We are also supposed to promote and protect human rights in all these institutions. But sadly, with the minimal funding, which is, and maybe here and there where you depend on donor support, and of course, in current setting where the donors now are inward looking, they are not very keen on, most of them are not very keen on funding, issues beyond their, I mean, it's not, as the traditional donors are also now not as ready or willing as they used to be. So it actually exposes the human rights protection arena and protection and promotion arena. Otherwise, we have that critical role of advocacy, advisory. So the prevention aspect even includes dealing with institutions like schools, universities, reaching out to all this group to nurture human rights principles in the country. So it's a very broad mandate, but without proper funding. And then the issue of investigation and redress, which is also very important. But without duties, funding should follow responsibilities. But,
so let me understand this. You're saying that on several occasions you've had to rely on donor funding for certain programs that you're running.
Yeah, for projects and programs.
So why is it not possible to get the financing from the Exchequer? Because
yes, we have lobbied from the Exchequer to be funded adequately, but it's not forthcoming.
Did they explain why?
Of course, they'll always refer to the debt crisis that we are experiencing. Though I think human rights in this country is for the benefit of all, including those in governance, and the different arms of government should also value human rights agenda to be promoted in the country, because it will be a plus to their,
Would you know how much money KNCHR would require to run effectively?
Right now we are getting below half a billion.
Yeah.
500 or 400 something.
Yeah.
But our mandate is huge if we are to, maybe more than $1 billion.
More than $1 billion?
Yes.
And the government is not ready to give that $1 billion?
Basically, we're just getting for logistics and salaries. So, and of course, even logistics is not adequate. And the staffing ratio is also very low.
Yeah.
So if you don't have adequate human resource, you don't have adequate finance.
But before we move on, so you said that you also deal with BATOK, which is British Army.
Mm-hmm.
How about KDF? Do you have any active investigation into KDF activities?
I'm not aware of any now, but I am aware of KWS, where this is Nakuru case. Yeah.
Okay, interesting. Would you know why? Would you know why there's an investigation into activities of KDF, even when there are complaints?
Maybe, yeah, we always take up complaints from the public.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe somebody hasn't complained, or there are cases maybe which I might not have come to my attention.
Okay, all right. And I see the plan was 510 billion shillings for the financial year starting July the 1st. That's what you've been allocated. But Fred, so again, pertinent questions about who was responsible, whether it's the Kenya Defence Forces activities, whether it is the role Parliament would play in assisting the investigations. What would you want to say?
It's unfortunate that if there I've listened to this issue of a Human Rights Watch report. Mm-hmm. If that report is anything to go by, if there are people concealing, those CCTV footage that actually shows the actions of the police, the brutality action of the police, then it's unfortunate. But I think it is in the interest of all of us as a country to collaborate and get to the bottom of this issue. The justice that the young people want today, in my view, is truth and accountability. And truth and accountability actually should reveal the faces of those who shot the young people in Parliament. Truth and accountability should demonstrate to the public what action has been taken or should be taken or is in place to ensure that these families get justice. Truth and accountability should ensure that we do not go back to this again. It is almost a year, and some you saw the other day, a young man was killed, allegedly killed in police cells. So it means nothing much is happening. But I am even more depressed when I hear constitutional commissions are not getting the support they need from the same government. These constitutional commissions act as state organs that must ensure they put all measures in place to get to the bottom of achieving the required human rights, compliance, abuses, and so on and so forth. They check on that. If that commission is not funded to achieve that, then there is a deliberate attempt to cripple it. And that's why I go back to the political goodwill, because this is the most important thing. If the president has shown political goodwill and he is collaborating with people who are outside government to ensure that we achieve the 10-point agenda, one of the achievements that we'd want to see as a country is end to police brutality. The other achievement that we want to see is truth and accountability. The other achievement we want to see is protection of liberties, these civil liberties. The Constitution of Kenya that we have today guarantees every person to demonstrate, to picket, and unarmed. I am getting very scared if we have goons that now are protecting the city while the police are supposed to do that. What are we witnessing? What are we waiting for? What are we waiting to see come Wednesday if that continues? In my view, a stakeholder engagement is really necessary. I saw the church yesterday come together to pray for these families, and the names were read. You have just reported that some. It's very painful. But are we waiting to see another on Wednesday? I don't think that should be the case. In fact, we would want to see where the government comes together, the Kenya Human Rights Commission come together, the police, the civil society, and put a pen to paper and commit that come Wednesday, we are not going to see another police death. We're not going to see another police provocation. We're not going to see another careless statement that will lead to violence, because this country belongs to all of us. Today, we have a public inquest on the death of Rek Masai going on. How I wish that it can be fast-tracked so that we know exactly what happened. But even as we do that, what happened to those who died in 2023 when the public was demonstrating actively about the cost of living? Because those are things that have not been addressed. What happens to those who are demonstrating about the youth unemployment? What happened to those who have not been found? Their families don't know whether they are dead, they are alive, they are detained, they are abducted. No one knows. We want to see progress in this. And seeing progress means we must not repeat exactly what happened. We must stay away from that and make progress that every Kenyan can appreciate. Kenyans don't appreciate what is happening today. They don't. Why? Because we have seen increment in the police brutality. The courts made themselves clear, the High Court, that in dealing with the crowd, the police must stop the use of live bullets. They must stop the use of these water cannons. They must stop the use of rubber bullets. They must stop the brutality. We have seen that continue. And that's why these young people are agitated. But some, I am encouraged that as a country, we have a provision in law that protects these young people. A provision in 55 that ensures that it's the mandate of the state with all the actors to guarantee them employment, to guarantee them education and training, to guarantee them inclusion in the political, economic, and social spheres. That is why there was MOU between Raila Odinga and Ruto to ensure that all these are implemented. So that political goodwill that has been demonstrated, we would want to see it fast-tracked. We would want to see it implemented so that as we move forward, we move this back and say that was history. Otherwise, we'll still be awakening the wounds.
Even as you speak about that,
yeah.
And that reminds me that at some point you spoke about politics is about interests.
Correct.
And I wish that you could unpack what exactly that means in the context of what you're talking about. But you say that Raila Odinga and William Ruto have come together in a 10-point agenda, and with all that agreement,
yes.
Just last week.
Yes.
Yes, it is last week. Boniface Mwangi Kariuki was shot by a policeman.
Yes.
And of course, the doctors were able to retrieve what looks like a plastic bullet. I believe that's what
the rubber bullet
means.
Yeah.
But a week earlier, you saw a man, Ojwang, dying in police custody.
Correct.
So what goodwill are we talking about here?
If you ask me, you see, that is what is expected, a goodwill. But if these are happening, then there's no goodwill. Where is the goodwill, Sam? The goodwill means you come together, you collaborate and agree that there are certain things that are to the detrimental of this country and must be stopped. And you come in good faith. Good faith means you implement what you agree. What we are seeing is increased police brutality. That is there, you have seen it. Because we talked of...
So is that MOU working then?
I think it's not working.
So what?
It's not working. If that was part of the MOU, then it is not working. What must happen then, the leaders must go back and reassess the content of that MOU. They must go back and agree.
But by the way, Fred,
and agree.
Who does it serve, that MOU? The people or those few leaders?
It should serve the people.
No, I'm asking you, who does it serve?
As it is now, I am not sure whether it serves the people or the individual, because what is happening should not happen. So if you ask me, Sam, to answer you correctly, I think that MOU should be revisited so that the people can benefit from its content. Sam, you know, when you talk about the causes of unrest, the young people said that they don't want corruption. The young people say that they want to be included. The young people say that they want employment. The young people say they don't want opulence. Some of these things are still happening.
Okay, let's take a look at the feedback that has come to us at Citizen TV Kenya. We took the hashtag to use the Citizen DAYBREAK on what Kenyans are saying this morning. Lekishon, you're saying that youth protests shook the regime last year, The government panicked, promised reforms, but responded with abductions and killings. Arrogance still reigns. Ruto allies cry incitement instead of listening. It's time the government reflects on what change the youth really want. Frank Orinde, it's been a whole year. No accountability, no arrest of rogue officers, no justice for the slain victims. Instead, Gen Z is met with tear gas, batons, bullets, more killings and lies. How can a nation claim rule of law while protecting killers in uniform? J.M. Musoma, it's a mockery to the Gen Z lives who paid the ultimate price to stop Finance Bill 2024 for Majority Leader Kimani Ichung'wah to brag that they sneaked it back in parliamentary bills passed in December. Such as thumping bravado only breeds more protests. Sam Masika, the MOU between Ruto and Raila to work together is a mockery and a tool of convenience for the duo. It has little to do with ending